We are now moving on to the panel discussion, which Steve Rubinow has very kindly, is going to very kindly chair for us. Its entitlement is Accelerating Unmatched Efficiency and Unlimited Scaling Through the Clouds. And he is going to be joined by 8 panelists. Would they kindly come up and join Steve on the floor? Manpreet Khurana from HCL Tech. Pranesh Babu from SIFI. Vijaya Shankar from Symphony. Sivakumar Ramurthy from Anunta. Balvinder Singh from Star TV. Amit Padke from Kale Consultants. Anis Tell from Dell. And Satya Shilan from PA Dell. There we have our 8 panelists joining Steve Rubinow. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a warm welcome. Steve, over to you.
Thank you. Ready for the musical introduction? Wow, I didn't realize this panel had theme music. That's great. I have to get the CDs out for after this. This is a nice segue from some of the brief comments I made before, and I'm glad to have this panel because it's such an important topic, such a well-discussed topic in the industry. I can tell you by way of introductory remarks that my long journey here that culminated this morning, I came from another conference, not unlike this one, which was, not to mention brand names, but it was the Accenture Global CIO Conference. And guess what? Some of the topics, and this was in Berlin, it was an international group. Let me tell you what some of the topics they talked about were. Cloud, security, mobility, big data, no surprise. And I hosted 2 panels there on cloud, not unlike this one. So some of their concerns are fresh in my head, and I bet that exactly the same concerns are echoed here. So at least as an industry, globally, we're consistent, but we'll talk more about that. But I can mention one thing, and one thing I'm very happy to see in Anis's slides and other comments that I've heard is that people have a realistic notion of what clouds can do. I think not too many people, at least technologists, aren't getting carried away. Maybe people in the business are. And I can tell you that at this conference that I just came from, one of the speakers there who spoke about cloud from a non-technology perspective is a fellow by the name of Nicholas Carr, and I don't know if you would remember that name, but he wrote an article, I think about 4 years ago in Harvard Business Review called Does IT Matter? Where essentially he said IT was a commodity, all IT was alike, there was no more competitive advantage to be gained, it was more like an electrical power plant, every power plant looks the same, and that of course, as we've heard before, CIOs were going to become extinct, or at least they were just going to become a liaison with a service provider, and that's what their job was going to be reduced to. Now, when he said that several years ago, he got a very interesting response from the crowd. They had to put up barriers to keep the CIOs from getting to him. And by the way, in this conference just a few days ago, he said the same thing about cloud. Cloud is a big disruptor. Cloud changes everything. The future will never be the same. CIOs, get prepared for your new job because your job is going to shrink to nothing. I don't think that there's too many people in this room that believe that. And so we have a very healthy, realistic notion because we've seen these predictions before. But having said that, the cloud as a member of the portfolio of your choices is an extremely important one. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let me, I again touched on how we got involved in cloud at the New York Stock Exchange in terms of our own internal use of it and then offering it to our customers as a service, which we think is a good model for us. But what many people want to know, especially those that haven't embarked on this journey yet, is how do I get started? What do I choose? What should be my first one? And for that, let me turn, and I would just open it up to my panel members here, if they would like to tell us stories or give us advice on what they think are the best ways to approach this. Whoever wants to be first.
Yeah, just wanted to introduce myself. I'm a company from Symphony Services, predominantly into product R&D and development of products. So I just want to tell our experience on the cloud. What we see is predominantly a cloud is another vehicle for delivering services to our customers as well as the end users. it's another vehicle. So it depends upon the financial models and the business requirements which you need to look at before taking a decision, because of the various technologies available in the market today. And from our company standpoint of view, we have been looking at cloud for the last 3-4 years. We have taken some services. So today we're in a state where we use both public, private, and a combination of both private. It's a hybrid model. And what we have seen is that not all applications can move to the cloud, because there's so much of investment which has gone in existing, be it your financial systems and stuff like that, which cannot be moved onto the cloud right away because it requires a lot of financial, a lot of money is required. So we have taken baby steps over a period of time, moving applications. We started off with non-critical applications, we're moving into cloud, where we see where the end user experience is better, right? For example, we started off with, your web content management be on the cloud. So, there's no major impact to end user. It's all about how best we can do content management, spam filtering, and stuff like that. Of recently, what we have seen is that by adopting cloud, we have saved a huge amount of money, right? For example, we saved about $1 million by doing web acceleration on the cloud, which is a huge new technology which has come in, where we dismantle about 75% of our MPLS network, and we use predominantly web acceleration on the cloud. What does it benefit the end user? The response time of applications, doing FTP traffic, etc., is much faster, and I get 7 to 8x the speed what I used to get from an MPLS. So net, it's a huge impact from an end user standpoint of view, as well as from a predominant for data traffic. I know it will work for voice, but time will tell. But these are some disruptive technologies which do come in from the cloud, and you need to adopt it as and when you feel it's required.
We are also a service provider for cloud, but then how it started for SIFI is we are looking at this technology and seeing what are the best applications to actually move into the to virtualization and the cloud. So SIFI has got a portal called sifi.com, and then this is the best application we thought we should move into the cloud, and we started working on it. Then we realized that there were various applications, so each of the websites were actually an application by itself. So consolidating that would actually mean consolidating network, the security layer. So that's when we thought we should, when you look at a cloud virtualization, we should do end-to-end virtualization. So we did not just stop with the storage and the compute. We went to the layer of virtualizing the network layer, that is the switch. Then we virtualized the firewall, which is the UTM. So we had a offering which was end-to-end. That's what struck us, and we thought we should, like what Steve was saying, they did it for NYSE, and they are now looking at implementing private cloud to the other customers. We also did the same. We thought we'll help our enterprise customers who actually, we incidentally have 4 level 3 and tier 3 data centers in India. So we thought we'll help our customers to actually make it look like a data center on demand rather than just a compute or storage on demand. So I think the most important thing about adopting cloud is looking at those kind of applications, which actually means a lot in terms of efficiency improvement, those which needs, which are not, those application loads which are not constant throughout the year, which are seasonal, and look at something like a particular scheme, which will generate huge traffic. So we have customers who have completely moved to the cloud for all their application, but we have customers who have moved only a certain portion of it, which is a seasonal based load based applications onto the cloud. Another significant thing what we look at for cloud is the DR, right? DR is something which is taken as a capex, a huge capex and opex, which is not actually used. So that's where I think the cloud computing comes very handy, because you can start very small, look at your small portion of the application, which only which may not be completely lights on, but a small portion for data replication. And when you actually want to have a DR, you can go to your public cloud service provider to actually enhance the capacity, enhance the CPU power, and have a full-fledged DR at that point of time, and you don't pay for it.
Thank you, Pranesh, for giving the perspectives. We heard the service provider perspective, we also heard the end user perspective. For us, both stands valid because I have to cater to the internal IT requirement as well as we are the service provider for the airline industry. So, as rightly said, you need to take a baby step while moving forward onto the virtualization journey, which effectively leads to cloud. So, if you ask us, we have been on stage 1 of virtualization for past 1 year, and that's a baby step that we have taken, wherein we have moved from splicing a larger box onto the splices of it and using it into the right perspective. Now we are trying to move to stage 2 where we can offer the services to our clients and scale it up as we grow, thereby lowering the capex from the business side of it and hence contributing to the top line of the business, okay, wherein we do provide these services, but the cost of us, it gets reduced. So the caption here is both, I think Miguel mentioned yesterday about you as a CIO, you need to add to both the bottom line as well as the top line. So if you ask me about the internal IT, we have been using these technologies and we have been cutting the cost to increase the, to reduce the bottom line of it. And at the same time, we are partnering with the business and in fact, we have been able to offer quite a few models to our customers which can contribute to the top line revenues as well. And I think these are the two different perspectives. And when you take a decision to go on a cloud, there are a lot of things that goes into it as a part of the design part of it. Okay. As I rightly said, you need to first assess what is it that you want to go ahead with moving on to the cloud. How do you want to go ahead with it? What are the technologies, the various hypervisors, the various infrastructure that you have in place? Is there a scalability in place? Is there the integration that is possible between the bottom line of it and so on? And only then you are in a position actually to go in the right direction. So these are few steps that you need to take before you actually decide to go on cloud.
Hi, morning everyone. Manpreet Khurana, I represent HCL Technologies. So this is a most complex and confusion technology that we are hearing. As I just take back 5 years back, we were all talking about virtualization. Everyone has seen that bird, but no one shooted and killed and eaten and tasted it. So cloud computing going on, my mind is that, from last 2 years, it's picking up. Public cloud is something which is not a big enterprise class people who are following. Private cloud is the most favorite one, which is going on the big enterprise class. So I represent HCL. We are around 80,000 people across 30 countries. We have our main business line is offshore development centers in software and BPO and infrastructure management. So I feel that there are two types of cloud opportunity that we have. By cutting the individual project, buying their devices in the 4 gears around compute, storage, network, security components individually in pocket-wise pocket, because they are dedicated customers. And due to regulatory, and due to the customer contracts, we can't put it on a shared LAN. So the second is a shared LAN customers, which gets less charged because they are on a shared LAN. Hence, there is a huge opportunity for us to, curtail the silos and put it on a shared LAN. So we have approximately 2/3 of the customers in the shared LAN environment. And there, we just tried and developed a phase 1, 2, 3. The phase 1 is already live with a $5 million investment on the capital expenditure, and close to 30-35 customers are already up. The second opportunity that we have is the all corporate applications, which are intranet based applications, 133 applications. For global user perspective usage, we consolidated, and it is giving a huge benefit. And by doing that, the provisioning has really taken up quite a lot. And while there was a debate and a question on the Anis presentation that 99.3, 99.4 is the SLA. Yes, I do agree. But if it is a private cloud, it is actually becoming 99.9 plus, because you have to now all the eggs are in the same small basket. You really have to put our best efforts to create a redundant. So I feel that cloud computing is picking up very fast. More in the private, less in the hybrid, less in the public, for the larger and the big enterprise class customers.
Hi, I'm Shiva. I'm from Ananta, which is my parent company is Fossos, which is a ITS BPO company. Our story on adoption of cloud is a little interesting. In fact, it's something which is a business decision which enabled us to get into cloud. It was in 2006 where we were thrown a problem from business to ramp up pretty quickly at various remotest centers in India. And the solution was to have multiple data centers across India, the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, which were not fully ready to adopt any good technology. So with this problem, we have been asked to ramp up within a month or 2 months' time to come up with a solution to solve, ramp the business. So at that time, we started embarking into this virtualization as well as cloud solution to see how I can deliver the best of the technology possible to the remotest place at the lowest cost. And the only thing which was told to us by businesses, the application delivery cost per hour is what we are going to measure. So what technology you bring in is, we don't care, but we are going to look at the application delivery cost per hour, and we are going to measure the end user experience. So if we can match these two and come up with a good technology, we are ready to adopt it. So that's when we started doing the cloud adoption, and we've been extremely successful by doing that. Contrary to starting with corporate applications, we actually started with mission critical production applications. So, and it really worked well. But this approach was not, a rookie approach where we spent time in researching about it, and IT was fully ready when business was about to ask it. So we had the research, concept, and we had a complete piloting which is done, and then we moved into implementation and started working in standardization. So in 2007 and 2008, we were fully ready to roll out the virtualization and cloud for our entire BPO sector. So today, if you look at in our environment, from the verticals of healthcare, telecom, media, and finance, all of them, BFSI, all of them are fully into cloud platform for us. So 5 of our global data centers are fully virtualized and cloud ready. And this is actually, given a lot of ability for moving the IT team to an innovation team. And one of the reasons for this Ananta, which we have incubated out of this, is like many of our IT resources got freed up from reactive folks to now into innovation. So including my CTO, he got relieved from there. Now he has become a CEO of this new company where now we are going on offering to our clients. So we feel cloud is something, which is going to enable, it's a business enabler for us. So from the BPO perspective, which we see, it has really enabled the business. The kind of agility and the kind of performance it has given to us is amazing. And we actually vouch for the private clouds. We were not very comfortable with public clouds. Our experience with the public clouds, I also heard in one of the questions from the forum earlier, it's very valid. The public cloud, we feel they're not fully ready yet for the kind of performance which is expected. The availability of 99.95 is mandatory, and my CEO doesn't care whether we are able to make it available or not, because that's by default it has to be given. So that's how we see it. It's a public cloud. Our view is not fully ready. Private cloud is something which we're very comfortable of.
Maybe I'm Balwinder, I belong to Star TV. As you know, we are more of a media company, so we produce a lot of video content. So in terms of cloud, we took it as a journey. We started this journey maybe a couple of years back. As everybody said, we took some baby steps. Okay, so when we were taking these baby steps, we came across a couple of very interesting requirements from business. As you know, we produce a lot of video content. This content gets produced from various production houses which are spread across the globe, across the country. This content used to come across to us in physical tapes. So they used to come to post-production houses, we used to do post-productions, then there are creative people, there are directors, there are producers who used to normally validate their content or do a quality check, okay, and there was back and forth happening out there itself. So this process used to take almost around 2 weeks to do this process. When we were talking to business, what is one of the biggest challenge you have it? So they said, we want to reduce this 2 weeks process to less than maybe 6 hours or 2 hours kind of a timelines. So that is where we thought cloud would be a requirement which would fit out there. So we took this requirement a year back, or maybe a year back, and 6 months we brought this complete applications. We wired up all our production houses. Okay, we took a project called as Go Digital project. This is all coming. We hosted also into a private cloud. Okay, so today with the help of this public cloud, we were able to deliver content to our uplinking center within 6 hours. So if we get this content, even like earlier it was happening within 2 weeks, now we can get it delivered ready within 6 hours itself. So it's a big advantage. Now, a couple of challenges which we encountered. One of the big challenge encountered was the integrations. Okay, there are a lot of integrations, reporting requirement which has come up over a period of time. We have a lot of video content. This content has to marry with a lot of our other applications. There are financial applications, there are broadcasting applications, there are normal CRM applications. So, and this is a huge content. I'm saying if this is available on a public cloud, okay, I'm saying it is difficult to marry this content and generate analysis out there itself. So this is one of the big challenge which we involved. Second was the security. In our domain, as you're seeing, piracy is a big area of concern for us. So if this content get leaked, it's a huge revenue loss for us. So then we get into the tweaking model. We thought it's a public model, it's fine, it's working out for us. So we thought, why don't we integrate into a hybrid model? So let the public model, let the content production activity happen out there itself, but we ensure the data after the production activity has happened, it comes to our particular, our own cloud itself. So we were able to manage the integration part because the data was available within our premises after the production houses. Okay, so we could marry the data, we could generate report, we could give analysis out there. So at the same time, security was also handled. I'm saying currently, after the complete activity, the data comes within our premises itself. So, but I feel just a pointers away, integration is a key factor when I normally took at it. So we had a big challenge, we're still struggling. Okay, the requirement of integration is increasing day by day. So they need more reporting, more analysis. We gave them 5 reports, now they need another 95 reports. So integration is a big piece area for me itself. So I would take away, whenever you plan your strategy across, look at the integrations. Okay. Second, I feel the last one is the regulations. I feel regulation is a gray area which is still not very clear. I don't know how we're going to handle that once we get more clarity. But I feel regulation is something, I don't know if there's an expert, something can talk about regulation would be really helpful.
Let me add to that a little bit. In terms of a model where there has been a profound influence in the use of cloud computing. Any of you that have talked to venture capitalists or the like in recent months or maybe even the year, there's been a bit of a sea change. So for instance, in the old days, maybe still this century, but the old days, if you had a good idea, if you wanted to start a company and you had a great idea, maybe the classic story is you'll take a piece of paper, you'll jot it down, you'll draw some pictures, you go to a venture capitalist and say, I have this great idea for a company, and he or she will look at you and say, okay, I think I understand it. You seem like a smart guy. Let's throw some money in here and get you started. Today, my experience has been if you go to a venture capitalist and you bring them a piece of paper with some drawings on it, they say, that's really great. But given the fact that you can get started as a company with just a credit card and a few dollars, don't bring me a piece of paper. Bring me an implemented idea that's in production on a public cloud, and then I will talk to you about investing. So that the standard of the expectation level is you will bring me a finished product that's actually working because it is so incredibly cheap to do it, to get started. Now that's not enterprise class, but to get started, that's the current expectation. So at least from a starter perspective, the cloud has had a profound change, or cloud services have had a profound change in terms of how companies are being born these days. Of course, not all, but most.
I would like to add to that comment which you said. Generally, when we talk cloud computing, we generally look at internal. About, can I run the legacy system, can I run, but I think one big thing which contribution which each one of us sitting here can contribute to the business, how to really become competitively, advantages in the market, how can you expand to the market which you have not done, and go to the customers who had inhibitions about, spending that initial capital to get IT. So these 3 big changes is one area which we have seen people moving in. Ever since the cloud computing came in, how many new companies came with new offerings and then capitalized on the market which is untapped. Right. And as CIOs, one big thing which you can put to the table is that. One is to look at how do you brand the efficiency, but another is to really look at how do you really work on that. And from just Dell's perspective, enough has been told, but only one point, like we see that future is going to be heterogeneous environment. How do you really bring management tools and efficiency which can work on this? How do you really get the infrastructure will work on that? I mean, these are the areas we are spending money and R&D and making products. I just add to that.
But let me change the topic to what I feel and what I hear from so many people across so many industries is the first question people ask about cloud implementation in a serious way, and that's the whole security issue. Look, I have debates sometimes with public cloud providers who tell me that the private cloud, and you probably have heard this as well, it's a transition step. It's a safeguarded, conservative step that if you really were liberally minded, and you would go right to a public cloud because they are perfectly secure and perfectly this and perfectly that. And when I ask about the topic of security, each and every public cloud provider says to me, don't worry about it because we have the best security people in the industry working for us. So every company has the best security people in the industry working for them. I don't know where the average security people work, but each company has the best security people. And as we all know, it's impossible to understand if you're 100% secure. It's like when the regulators ask me if I can guarantee them that when we turn out an application is 100% bug-free. I don't know how to guarantee that. I don't know how to determine that. If someone does know that, please let me know. In the same way, you can all be confident about your security models, but you can never be really sure. And one of the problems or opportunities, depending on how you look at that with cloud technologies, is no matter how simple you make the interface, no matter how mindless the service request is to the cloud, it is pretty complicated behind the scenes. And complexity is not a friend of security, and complexity is not a friend of reliability. So more engineering work has to be done in order to make sure that you can sleep at night, that things are properly secure. So security is a big question everyone asks, whether it be public, private, it doesn't really matter. People ask the question, especially in regulated industries, but in all industries. So again, my fellow panelists, if you want to comment about your perspectives, concerns about security, or ways you've overcome it, or have assured yourself that it's sufficient, those would be great comments.
Steve, in fact, I completely agree. One of the challenges for us on why we are not moving to a public cloud is there are two issues which is prohibiting us. One is the security aspect of it, second is the reliability. So from the security, from the healthcare, specifically the healthcare claims, the HIPAA, the regulatories, the SaaS regulations, PCI regulations, the audits which we go through, is pushing us too much into, making sure what's really in the data, how are you going to protect the data, what kind of assurance you can give. And all these answers today, the public cloud providers are not transparent enough. So the kind of slice they're going to do, the kind of segregation they're going to do for us, they're not transparent enough to tell us. They say it's going to be taken care. We've got best people in place. But as we talk, as late as this year, April, the world's largest cloud provider system was down for 4 days. And it happened just because one network engineer made a mistake, So, and these are the kind of risk, and I can't, we can take it as a one-off incident, we can't ignore it because it's a 90% of availability. So now, these are the pointers to my regulators, these are my pointers to my security folks. So these reliabilities and security, unless we have got a transparency in the system, which is going to come and assure us that it's called taken care, I don't think we'll be fully ready to move into public cloud, especially on the critical business data.
Security is a very broad subject by itself, and in cloud it becomes that much more muddled up and confused. And when you get to public cloud, especially with public cloud providers, you don't know where your data is going to actually be sitting, where the systems are, where the storage systems are, and so it gets even more confusing. And then you have regulations and compliances that may be imposed upon your industry. For example, governments don't like their data to be housed outside their geopolitical boundaries. Military, obviously, are not keen on letting their data be hosted by somebody else. Financial organizations have local regulatory compliances, yet they have international compliances as well, and they have self-imposed regulations. And security is never, ever 100%, whether it's public or private or whatever it may be. And audits can only highlight so much, and security controls that are put in place by public providers can only go so far, and by yourself as a private organization can only go so far. So it's rare that a public provider can give you, anybody can give you assurances. It's not possible. Security is a journey, it's never ending. Some providers have better measures, better capabilities, better experience in place, and some don't, as do private organizations. It's a bit of a, excuse the term, a crapshoot. on that day, that event happened because one engineer wasn't there, or one engineer made a mistake, whether that's in your organization or outside your organization. When Sony PlayStation Network went down, they stole hundreds and millions of financial records. And if your children use the PlayStation Network, I would tell you, cancel your credit card, and all the history that you ever did was being exposed to some third party. If you use the internet for your public cloud, which is by definition what you use, then you're exposed to the internet. And the question of security becomes diluted, philosophical, and confused in the public arena more so than maybe in the private arena often, but it's actually sometimes just as valid in the private arena. And there's no simple solution. Nobody can give the assurances, and nobody can ensure the code is 100% bug-free. It takes due diligence, it takes intelligence, it takes continuous monitoring, it takes accreditations. There are standards in place, ISO 27001, PCI DSS, HIPPA, Sarbanes-Oxley. All of these are there to try and set some standards that can give you a level of comfort, but nobody really will assure. And this is always going to be the case. If somebody has a solution, please tell me.
In fact, I fully support Anish on this, because nobody can provide 100% security, because you see there's a lot of data available over there. It says that it's not predominantly the vulnerabilities at the network layer or the data layer. Predominantly, a lot of vulnerabilities are seen in the application layer. When you deploy an application, the vulnerabilities are much more, because people don't really do the things which are required from an application development. And that's where people really get access to a lot of things which have happened. Even the recent cases where a lot of hacking has happened is because the applications which have been deployed was not proper, where the vulnerabilities have not been taken care. At the data layer and the network layer, most of the things have been taken care of, more secure, but there's a huge amount of vulnerabilities which are available on the application and the product layer. Since we have been in the product, we do develop products for a lot of companies. We have seen some of the products which are there in the market, well-known products for the last 10 years, 12 years in the market, has huge amount of vulnerabilities. And that when you deploy it in the cloud, you're going to have more serious security problems. So it depends upon the enterprises when they deploy these things that have been taken care of. It's not, security is always, will be a concern, and even going forward will be a concern. It's like, you do financial transaction, your own personal transactions, it's all done on the internet banking, it's all also on the cloud. It's all there in the mind today. So it's how comfortable you are in doing the transaction, that's where it is.
Just want to add a couple of points, while interacting on, if you look at Indian law as well as, and I'm sure it's true the international also, the technology is moving much faster than our law. And they are doing the catch up. And if you really look at today to start a cloud-based services in the market, it doesn't take too much of an issue. But if you look at, if there is a licensing authority or a governing authority which certifies that this provider can start the service only after A, B, C, D, which is trustworthy, then that system is not available at this point of time. So it's for us to really look at who are the right providers before we go for it, and what kind of accreditation we have. And many of us really go for the history of what is known problems. And another point is, even if you go for the best of it, in our own environment we get failures. So there is no provider which is going to be fault free. But we have to have our redundancy. But I've had a lot of discussions where government agencies are making a struggle to really catch up with the technology progression. So it's for us to really determine what's good for us, do the due diligence, and take the right services.
There's one point which I want to raise on the regulation part also. I was reading a judgment article, I feel, on the LinkedIn account, an individual owning an LinkedIn account. When he moved out from the company, okay, I feel, if I not remember the country name properly, it was UK. They passed a judgment. The individual, since he started a consultancy business, he's supposed to surrender all the accounts which he had in his LinkedIn account. Okay, nobody of us would like to surrender it. So I'm just trying to phrase that question. If we have a similar situation in a cloud environment where we are on to maybe taking Dell as an example, if we host our application on Dell Cloud, and if we don't know where our data is, okay, and tomorrow we end up into a similar judgment situation, so where do we end up? I'm saying, maybe I don't know whether if there's an answer to it or no. Maybe Anish or somebody can answer that.
I can't answer that.
So, but I think, what we can be transparent is where do we host data,
right,
what controls we have, what measures can be there, and all those audits. But certain things like these, LinkedIn accounts, how do we transfer all those things? I don't think that we go to that extent of.
Normally, my question is, if you have an application which is hosted on a cloud environment, we don't know where our, normally one is we need to be very, very clear, we put it into our own governing authorities, where we follow our own Indian regulations or wherever it is simpler for us to. But sometimes we end up into a situation where we do not know where our data is.
Yeah, I think one big point I want to bring it out is that when we do service to a global customer base, we try to position with the highest determined standard which is prescribed for the international customers. So like if you go for security regulation is highest, let's say for example, if it is, let's say in United States, that's what we would adopt in the rest of the country. So you try to get that investment coming from large companies. They invest on all security controls, measures, what is prescribed internationally is the best standard and then pulled. But it doesn't mean that it is zero fault free. I would not guarantee. But I think I would say that that's the best which we can do. And what organization by itself can do is much less than that. So you really get the best of securities, what is known and put, and then you try to deliver services to a global customer base. But if you really look at a small company with himself, he may not be able to really invest on that much, and he may think that that risk is, you take a point, there will be a business point at which you will say that this is fine enough, well value for money. That kind of approach will come into it.
Yeah, what you should do as a consumer of public cloud is ask the cloud provider, where are the servers hosted? Where is my data going to be stored? How is it going to be encrypted? What happens when this event happens and this goes down? How am I allowed to monitor and measure what's going on? How can I check and audit you? It's going to be incumbent upon the consumer of the public cloud service to make sure you take on the onus and responsibility of measuring and monitoring how the public cloud provider is treating you and the service you're purchasing from them and the data that they are providing and the compute power and so on and so forth. So make sure that in your contracts, in your SLAs, and in everything, you do your due diligence and you understand the regulations that they may have to follow, depending on geography maybe, and that you want to impose and negotiate with them as well. The concerns you have and how they should be addressed. You're not always going to get exactly what you want, but there are a suitable set of compromises that may be achievable.
I agree. I feel all of us normally try to do all these activities, or I was just trying to highlight that point, because there's a big consideration. If I was trying to relate this LinkedIn or transaction or judgment, if you end up into such situation when you have a live scenario, you have a critical application, then where do you go? So normally, just keep a pointers, keep a check when you are doing this. So I just want to highlight that point to everybody out there.
On the other hand, there is saying which goes that 70% risks of the data leakage is internal, right? So there was a debate, I was attending another conference, so that you should not create a private cloud, you should create a public cloud, but 30% risk is only now there. Yeah, so there you do a 1, 2, 3 layer of security. So it's interesting discussions, but I agree to what this gentleman said, that the HIPAA, the SOX, the SAS, the ISO 27001, none has any pointer which says that, okay, I will give a green chit if you are outsourcing to public, because 1, 2, 3, 4, and control on those 1, 2, 3, 4, again, 20 in each, huge humongous for us to, contrary on to. But yes, all of that can be there and as a green while you consolidate internally to make a private big cloud and offer to your business A and your internal employees, which are, finance department, HR department, this, that, blah, blah, blah. So their security is not an issue because you are doing a security layering too, and that's working very well.
Well, let me add, in the regulatory issue, for those of you who have regulatory concerns, is a big one for us as well. And Anish was talking about international data movement, and that's a constraint. If we were going to have the purest of cloud implementations, we would virtualize across data centers, across international boundaries. But regulators don't want to know that the data is here today and somewhere else tomorrow and not know exactly where it is. So they pull back on that. And of course, by nature, they have to be technically conservative because they don't want to get on the frontier and make a mistake. And I can tell you, it's easy to poke fun at some things that regulators say, but when they understood that between our European markets and our US markets, they were connected by the undersea cable, right away they panicked and they said, does that mean that the data is leaking over to Europe? And I said, you mean like when you punch a hole in a barrel and the water leaks out? No, no, no. We actually are more controlled than that. But that was the first image they conjured up because they were getting too nervous about these things and want to make sure that they dot the I's and cross the T's before anything happens. And by the way, we went through the same nervousness with regulators when we moved to open source things like Linux. What's this open source? Isn't it risky? Isn't it just for hackers and people at home? And it took a few years for them to be comfortable with, while the rest of the non-regulated world had already adopted it. The regulated world was, let's wait and see. Let's see what other people are doing. And so it's obviously a concern that we have all the time. Now, let me switch to another topic. We don't have that much time left. If someone could make some brief comments on, after security, one concern that everyone has, or a lot of people have, is lock-in. If I choose a certain way of doing things, whether it's a certain cloud vendor, a certain set of technologies to implement my cloud, and then something else better comes along, or I find that this is constraining, how laborious is it for me to switch or to marry my applications and data with somebody else's cloud in a hybrid scenario? This is another concern that people have. I should be a little bit more conservative because what if I make a mistake and I find myself stuck in something that I didn't foresee? Anybody want to talk about lock-in problems? Please.
So, sorry, I'm jumping in quite a bit. One of the areas that I always recommend is to have certain architecture principles whenever undertaking any type of IT initiative. And some of the key fundamental IT principles, if you go to TOGAF or Zachman or whoever it is, are to have a technology neutral architecture, to avoid vendor lock-ins, to ensure interoperability, to do this. So when you make your next decision and strategy in any IT initiative, always try to understand or document these architecture principles, and they're readily available. You can find them online, a good 10 to 20 principles that you should keep in mind, and the rationales behind them as to what you should be trying to achieve to avoid hiccups and problems down the line, whether they be interoperability issues, vendor lock-in issues, security issues, performance and availability and robustness issues. They should be fundamental guiding principles for you in your initiatives. And that's why vendors, yes, I am Dell, are realizing this. They're waking up to it, some faster than others, obviously, and they are trying to provide solutions that will be, in general, heterogeneous. They will work with other vendor products, with other vendor applications, with other vendor solutions. And you should try, unless there is an overriding demand and need specifically for your initiative, you should always try to have this open and scalable and vendor neutral type approach to ensure you don't get the lock-ins and the problems, because we know from previous eras the vendor lock-ins can become big maintenance hogs and big cost hogs, and as we pointed out previously many times, it's keeping the lights on which consumes the majority of your division's budgets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just coming about vendor lock-ins and service provider lock-ins. I think the good portion about a public service provider, cloud service provider, is that you have options of hardware, right? While like Anish said, if Dell and all the vendors look at a very open platform, which is very interoperable with everything, that's the best way to have it. But as long as you're working with a public service, cloud service provider, you should have an option of, I think they're very flexible. I think the billings are almost like every second or every half an hour. So it's very easy to move from one provider to the other provider. And most of them support all the virtualization platforms and the hardware. So that becomes much more easier in that case.
In fact, as an end user of these services, in fact, we predominantly use more than one service provider. We have used a couple of them from Microsoft, Azure, then you have Amazon, and then you have Rackspace. So we always keep taking the required computing power from various technology providers so that don't get into a lock-in. That's very, very important because you're bound to get locked in sometime. So the only thing which we have today is on the platform as service, which is from Microsoft Azure. Any new provider comes, we need to look at it. But predominantly, we've ensured that we have taken from all these three service providers, so you don't get into a lock-in. Other it becomes a challenge later on.
Makes a lot of sense.
In fact, for public cloud, a lot of service providers are playing a gimmick of being a local proximity provider. Okay, so that the region-based Indian customer need not go on to Amazon or to Google for their public cloud services. They can still look at the local telco operators or the local cloud service providers where data remains within the boundaries. Okay, so the regulatory-wise, it's easy to handle. Two, you still have the visibility as far as where your data is residing. It is within the geography that you're talking about, and you can be precise there as to which location, which server, and so on from the compliance perspective. And at the same time, it's easy for you to walk out of it because it's easy to get into something, especially the cloud part of it. But if you have to walk out of it, it's easy for you in case if you know where your data is lying and what is the visibility to it.
Right. Yeah, let me then, in the few minutes that we have left, let me turn it over to you folks in the audience. If you've got any questions or comments that you'd like to make involving the panel, we'd love to hear them now.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I have two questions. One for a gentleman from the Star TV, and another for Sifi. My question is that see, you have changed your lead time from 1 week to 6 hours by just using the cloud computing. I have some question on that. Are you changing your process and using cloud computing as a media? Or you are just using the cloud computing for this, you're minimizing your lead time? Which one is correct?
Yeah. See, when we were defining that requirement, I feel that requirement was directly fitting out there. So everybody's been talking about anytime, anywhere. So when we were talking about this requirement, it was anytime, anywhere, from any device, on demand, and flexible. Okay, so I feel this was an approach. So when we were looking at that approach, okay, so we have production now just spread across the globe itself. So when we look at the requirement, it was normally fitting into the bill of a public cloud. As you said, we can also do that. We could have done it in case hosting it within our premises. Okay, but in terms of the cost for hosting that infrastructure is exorbitant. Okay, I don't know whether you're aware of the broadcasting equipment. They are very, very expensive equipment available, and maybe most of them are not even available within India itself. So when we look at all those factors, maybe from a cost perspective also, it was normally sounding very interesting to us. And it was not only the technology part, there were processes also, there were people also which were factored into it.
Yeah, that is what I feel.
If you normally compare all those things, there are people, process, and technology. So when we combined all those things, it made more sense for us to do that.
Yeah. And my second question to Sifi, as I understand from there, that for the cloud, say changing from the MPLS VPN to the cloud, he get enough responses, fast responses for that. Do you feel that the MPLS VPN connectivity we have taken so far from the Sifi should remove and go to the cloud computing?
No, the way we approach is we are not a so-called completely public cloud. So we integrate very well in our data centers with the MPLS and the public internet very well. In fact, we went to the extent of virtualizing the network layer so that you have a separate front end for the internet and a separate front end for the MPLS. And that's what you do when you actually go to any data center and actually do a hosting of your servers. You have one facing internet and one facing the MPLS. And you can seamlessly do it online and on demand. That's the way we approached it. So we are not dispensing of the MPLS. No.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, the point is that what I understand during the discussion, in the very preliminary discussions, what I understand, and just sitting beside you, that he has removed his MPLS connectivity and moving to the cloud to get the benefit out of it, and he got a beautiful results, and he got a very good response. So my question, I am having a lot of MPLS cloud taken from SIFI. Shall we remove this thing and go to some cloud vendors or what?
Okay, so I happened to have a discussion with Suresh before. See, he is actually having a particular requirement of distribution, content distribution, right? On a content distribution, it makes sense for him to actually get into that, to actually push the content to the edge. Instead of doing it on the MPLS, he's doing it on the internet. So it depends on the security, the reliability, and the latency requirement of your application. So if it is an online ERP, you will still retain your MPLS as it is, right?
Yeah, I just want to add more, right? From our standpoint of view, we have a global workforce, right? And we had MPLS networks paying a lot of dollars. And then we had new service provider from the cloud who came and said, you know, I can give you at 1/4 the cost, and the end user experience would be much, much better, right? So we never believed that. And then we said, let us do a POC. So we did a POC for about 4 months, 5 months. And then we got a feedback from our end users to what the experience was. He's saying that the experience was phenomenal. They could see a huge amount of difference from an end user who are not technology oriented. They are the HR people, the finance people, and stuff like that. Now, this is predominantly some of the service providers do provide content delivery, CDN type of technology, where you can do these things at a much more better, faster way, and the end user experience is much, much better, and you can save cost. Again, it depends upon what type of applications you are using, right? Is it more content delivery, the end user experience is what you expect. Even your application which you are using, right, for any .NET application or Java application people are using, the experience will be there. FTP traffic, you will see a huge amount of difference. And you get 7 to 8x of, the required bandwidth by using this technology. Again, this is a new technology which are coming in the cloud, and we have to embrace it after doing your own due diligence on it. But it's fantastic. Today, my experience on that has been good, and definitely we would always recommend those. But first thing is you need to try it out on your own network.
So I think that our time is up, so we'll end on that very positive note about things being fantastic. That's always a good ending note. And I want to thank my fellow panelists for their insight and advice. And if there are other questions, as I'm sure you do, I'm sure you can catch us offline to ask some more. So with that, thank you, and we'll go to the next topic.
Gentlemen, Steve Rubinow and his panel, many thanks indeed. Please give them a big, warm round of applause. A great discussion there, so thank you all very much indeed. We now have a partner snap session, and it is with delight that I invite Mr. Vinod Krishnan from VMware to come and deliver his speech on Your Cloud, a New Era in IT. Vinod Krishnan is Country Manager, India for VMware's emerging products portfolio and is responsible for driving adoption of VMware cloud technologies amongst customers in India. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome onto the stage Mr. Vinod Krishnan.
Thank you. I guarantee after this one cloudy presentation, we would all head out and start appreciating the clear skies of Dubai. I've been instructed to keep it short and sweet, and I'll try my best to do so. It's been a great privilege and pleasure to spend the last 2 days with each of you, and I should express my sincere thanks and gratitude to Dell for the wonderful partnership that we shared and for providing us the opportunity to be here in front of you today. Right, while it's obvious over the last 2 days, over the discussions that we had, that IT is looking at one more change, how much ever we would love to hate that. Fortunately, there seems to be a safe path this time around, right, to embrace the change. VMware, the leader in virtualization and cloud infrastructure, has been working with customers across the globe to accelerate that transition into converting IT into an agile service provider. For those of you who are not familiar with VMware, a very quick recap. We're about a $3 billion company last year in revenues. So much of money in bank as reserves, which would, as you can guess, helps a lot in undertaking the R&D efforts for a business like this. More importantly, about 250,000 customers who've deployed the technology as a standard platform to run their compute environment. This is extremely heartening to note that as per Gartner, 84% of all virtualized applications run on a VMware virtual infrastructure. This should give most of you the comfort and the confidence to be with the leader. As part of our leadership position, what we've also managed to stitch together is a fabric of 1,300 technology partners who supplies various gears into a data center. Again, you would appreciate that this is very important as we move down this path of virtualization and cloud computing to ensure that there is interoperable open standards being delivered to you than vendor lock-in, etc., like some of the panelists spoke about. As an extension of the ecosystem, we've also started working with the cloud service providers, right? And we have partnerships with about 3,600 cloud service providers across the world now, and you will see some of the Indian names as well, where essentially we supply the gear for them to stand up their own cloud, be it private or public. Again, a quick snapshot. Most of you would be familiar with the Gartner Magic Quadrants. On the virtualization, on the server virtualization part, we've been positioned in the leader quadrant. So as well, our partners and the top 5 partners who position themselves in the leader quadrant all have clouds powered by VMware technologies. Again, like you would recall the discussion that the panelists had, the world is moving towards a hybrid model where you would ultimately end up having your private cloud and take service on demand from a public cloud vendor. It is very important for people like us to drive standards so that you have an interoperable portable infrastructure that you could move across. So while all of us are looking at change, there is one thing which is constant with our IT organization, and that's the constant pressure to enable greater agility for business while becoming more efficient, right? Do more with less, as was the theme of the event. The reality is different though, right? Business in its quest to chase growth brings in complexity, brings in changes, which is inevitable and in a larger sense good for everyone. That leaves us in IT to handle huge amount of complexities, be it in terms of bloated application portfolio, legacy applications that we got to do with, inconsistent architectures, inflexible infrastructure, etc. Right? And people seem to have found a way. People seem to have found a way. The CIOs that Gartner poll seems to have found a way, while most of them have tasted blood with virtualization. Like Manpreet said, it's high time somebody shoots down the bird on cloud, right? People seem to have started focusing at moving cloud as a priority number 1 in 2011. So what we as a leader in the space really trying to drive is to help you with a consistent framework that will help you define your cloud architecture, help you define your cloud framework, and see what are the risks, what are the benefits that you could accrue out of it. Obviously, like the panelists said, virtualization is fundamental and a stepping stone to cloud, right? You all know the benefits of virtualization, where the pooling of resources, the automated management of resources, will help you really push down the cost of delivering services to your users. And now with cloud, there is a potential for you to actually push down the cost curve itself, right? With a larger pool of resources that you can abstract, with a larger amount of automation that you can bring in, there is a potential now for you to actually shift down the cost curve itself. Not just incremental benefits, but a drastic benefit in the cost curve. And the trend is already catching up, right? Last year in 2010, you will see the blue graph overtaking the gray one, right? For the first time, there are more number of virtual machines being deployed on an annual basis than physical hosts. People are embracing virtualization. People are moving on to the cloud, and they are taking the first right step by virtualizing their internal infrastructure. So what are the values? And most of you are familiar with the values that we deliver out of virtualization, right? First and foremost, we reduce the complexity, right? By pooling resources, by allowing you to virtualize your hardware, by compressing your hardware resources into the lesser footprint, we bring in lesser amount of complexity into your data center. This also helps you to dramatically lower costs, right? Through server consolidation, through virtualization, storage, virtualization dramatically reduce your cost of delivering IT as a service to the users. And to top all of this, it also brings you a very flexible, agile delivery model of your services. Your CFOs have got used to saving money for themselves. Luckily, virtualization is not an end by itself. It paves way for a new era in IT called cloud computing, right? We will see how we define some of those equations as we move along. But as most of us would have realized over the last 2 days, it's quite a chatter out there. There are as many definitions of cloud as any of us can think about. So is it really marketing machineries of vendors working overtime? Or is there meat in the whole argument? While there are different definitions of cloud, the good thing seems to be that there is a broad consensus that cloud can drive business agility. That it came out in the panel discussion as well, that there is a strong business case that cloud can drive business agility. To that extent, it should not be a surprise if your CFOs, if your business leaders start propagating cloud within your organization. While our CFOs would like to believe that cloud is free of cost for everyone, actual studies point that there is a potential to save about 25 to 30% when you move on to a public or a hybrid cloud model as against what you have as an internal infrastructure. Right. Another data point, Gartner believes that by 2012, 76% of private enterprises would have a cloud strategy in one way or other, right? Which is a good thing, because all of us start thinking on how do we optimize further, how do we save costs further. So what is this cloud thing? How do we as a leader in the market space look at the whole scenario? How do we see that getting into a context? How do we put a framework around the whole thing, right? So that at least we drive a consistent language amongst the users, amongst vendors, so that we're not getting really diluted in our discussions. And so there are people in the public cloud space, right? The infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. We saw some of them in the panel today. You could go out, take servers on rent, storage on rent, and then there are the development platforms on cloud, right? You have the Google ones, you have the VM4s, the Salesforce ones. These are really development platforms that you could leverage to start writing applications out for the cloud. And then there are the software as a service providers who are there for a long time. You have the Salesforces, you have the Workdays, for example. And then you have yourself. You have yourself, the CIOs who've been running your own infrastructure for years together. Most of you would have moved that into a virtual infrastructure. But then, as many of us said, we can't do away with that infrastructure in which ways. Ultimate objective of cloud computing being to embrace an approach that leverages efficient pooling of on-demand, self-managed virtual infrastructure, which can get consumed as a service, right? And I'm sure most of you would agree. As long as we have that definition of cloud in perspective, we get to simplify a lot of the other equations that we are trying to put together. And this is really the strategy of VMware, and this is the vision that we are trying to drive into you as customers, right? So there is really no need for you to chase a cloud. Maybe there are not too many birds out there that we need to kill it. All we got to probably do is to define our own cloud, which could be an amalgamation of various offerings that we see in the market. Have that in a consistent framework that is manageable, secure, and compliant. So what are we doing as a vendor to address these three challenges, right? Fundamentally, at the bottom layer, as you can see, we are trying to evolve the infrastructure that you have, the virtual infrastructure that you have, into a cloud infrastructure. How do you make it more robust? How do you make it more agile? How do you make it more self-manageable? And how do you make it more resilient? While it is good to optimize the infrastructure and make it resilient, we also got to keep in mind that it is very important to develop applications or modernize your applications for the cloud. We heard about a 100 terabyte database today, right? It's practically impossible to think of running a 100 terabyte database on a cloud, right? We got to start thinking of scale out databases. We got to start thinking of shrink wrapped applications that are faster, almost rapid to deploy. And then last but not the least, how do you deliver all of this to the end users seamlessly, right? You have PaaS, you've got software as a service, you've got your own internal infrastructure and services. How do you deliver all of that to the users consistently over the same user experience portal rather than being disparate services being thrown at him? Right, so we have a prescriptive, and it could be a prescriptive model to the cloud, where we say there is an evolutionary path to move to clouds than a disruptive one. There's a journey that one can undertake. One can transform its internal infrastructure into a cloud model. First and foremost, most of you would have done this, is to virtualize your internal infrastructure, your IT applications, which is really under your control, right? Start getting efficiencies out of your internal infrastructure, out of pooling your infrastructure applications, your file and print, your PDC, your mail messaging, etc. The real driver there should be a cost savings, right? There is dramatic cost savings to be realized upfront the moment you virtualize your internal IT applications. Once you're done with it, you can probably look at the phase 2 of adoption of virtualization, which is really around virtualizing your business production applications, maybe your SAPs, maybe your Oracle applications, right? The focus there, while you've realized a lot of cost savings in the phase 1, the focus in the phase 2 naturally would move towards creating better availability for the infrastructure, better resilience for the infrastructure, right? Because you're now started tinkering with the applications that matters to the business a lot. And then once you're done with these two phases, and once you have a stable infrastructure, once you've created an elastic infrastructure that can scale up and scale down, you start bringing in the cloud functionalities, right? Workflow integration, self-provisioning, chargeback, right? Tiering of applications, storage management, right? So a very non-disruptive, evolving way of moving into a cloud infrastructure. Again, keep in perspective, while we optimize our infrastructure, while we bring in efficiencies within our infrastructure, business out there is changing rapidly, right? Which is the fundamental driver for us to do all of this thinking around cloud. There are new applications out there which needs to get provisioned almost instantaneously, right? The time to market for a business is shrinking from months to days. So what we are really trying to do is to build out a stack of technologies that helps customers like you and our service providers to leverage the various features that cloud can offer, right? So again, to relate back to the same color code that we had, at the bottommost layer, we have the virtualized infrastructure that can add more functionalities as you evolve through the cloud journey, right? Most self-provisioning, automation, self-healing technologies, self-monitoring technologies, etc. Interestingly, what we are doing, so if you see on the left-hand side, it's vertically slashed as a secure private cloud, right? While we drive the same technologies with end customers to move the current infrastructure into a cloud, into a private cloud, we work with our cloud partners to drive the same standards, right? Panelists spoke about risk of cloud vendor going down, risk of cloud vendor not meeting SLAs, right? It's very important for us to have portability of applications across, not just from internal to external for a hybrid cloud model, but also from one cloud provider to the other. And we continue to build the same at different stacks, right? So at the second layer, we start building out technologies that will help you develop applications for a cloud environment, right? Modernize your current application, rewrite those applications for a cloud environment. Scale out databases, in-memory databases that could potentially form a transcontinental data grid for you that could get hosted on a cloud environment. And we are working with our cloud partners to achieve that as well. And last but not the least, ensure that we deliver that consistently to the end users across the board, right? Not just what we have from our private cloud, but also what we would get from a VMware-enabled cloud provider, public cloud provider, as well as independent public clouds like a software as a service, etc. And so we're focused on building out each of those product stacks so that as a customer, you start on your journey, virtualizing your internal infrastructure, moving that into an internal cloud. On a parallel track, we work with the cloud provider so that there are interoperable standards being driven out, there's portability being driven out, and a consistent user experience that can ultimately be delivered. All of this leading to, as we said before, your cloud, which should be secure, compliant, and controlled by you. So in summary, we provide the mandatory building blocks for the cloud. We supply, we are the arms supplier to the warring nations in one way, not just at infrastructure, but also at the applications and at the end user level. So be it private, public, or hybrid, and the debate would continue for some more time. Suffice to say that we help you enable your cloud as of today. So as promised, I have shrink wrapped my presentation, and thank you very much for listening in. It's been a pleasure to speak with you today.